All right, Daryl, thank you for joining me. Good to see you. So you just came out of a fascinating session with Mike Rogers and Chris Englas talking about advanced attacks, targeting specifically OT and kind of this doctrine shift among some of these actors. Um, from the perspective of a CISO heavily invested in OT, what should they know about these advanced actors and this kind of doctrine shift in their tactics right now?
Well, I think each of the CISOs should be focusing on understanding the dependencies of the OT to every asset of their business, of their own IT. And many people have know, like generally, hey, I've got power, I need water, or I've got, emergency response or something like that. But, to know all the way down to the hardware, software, firmware level, and where it was made, the S-bomb, H-bomb, F-bomb, if you will, to kind of get to understand where, those things come from and, what kind of relationships, in terms of communication and updates. We still have a lot of folks that say, all the OT is going to be okay because it's not connected to everything else. But even if it's in that state, you still have to have someone come in and give a patch or an update to it, right? So it's not truly completely disconnected.
And just a question about kind of this shift in what the threat actors are doing. For now, anyway, do you think that this is more about a demonstration of capabilities, a projection of power, versus actually trying to be destructive?
Well, so there's a couple parts to that. I think they're easier targets. So that is, one of the things in every aspect of warfare. You're going to go after the easiest target with the greatest impact. And so since there hasn't been a focus on updating, upgrading, investing in maturity from a network or cyber perspective, these are the targets you go for. And it should be no surprise to anybody, these are the targets the good guys and good cyber gals go after as well. So it's just fundamentally, until they become hard targets or they become targets that aren't worth going after, they still will be the targets of choice.
Sure. I mean, it is encouraging. We're seeing a lot of cyber research into OT,
Right.
vulnerabilities, et cetera. It's definitely helping the situation. As you talk to CISOs, again, in the OT realm, what are you hearing about some of their challenges and, any advice in terms of certain pitfalls to avoid, some traps
Right.
they might fall into? What's your experience there?
Well, I know a lot of them now, and they're taking this role on, which I absolutely applaud. And I've seen this work very well in the commercial space. In the government space, we really have yet to embrace that. So we're kind of seeing there's a number of things that are happening as the in-between period. So understanding the as-is drawings of your systems. We continue to have seen a lot of upgrades or updates happening, and they haven't been documented in the OT space. So we've had several instances where they'll go make a change and say, okay, we're ready to go, and swap out a server, and then everything goes out.
Sure.
And it wasn't because anybody did anything wrong from a network perspective, but they just didn't have the right drawings. And so making sure that those fundamentally are accurate. And that will take more than zero time and may cost more than $0. Then placing sensors in places that make sense. You may not have to have 1,000 sensors if you only need 3 for your OT network, and whether it's your passive monitoring or kind of, now we've got an active passive opportunity to understand a little bit more what's going on there. So smartly put those out there. I think fundamentally we've got to do OT cyber incident response rehearsals. Now, that's another thing that happens on the IT side, or if an alert comes in, people know what to do with it and know where to respond. We don't have that good process in the government, and that certainly can be improved, and getting the right people to be part of that. You've got plenty of OT stakeholders who are running all the the OT networks, like say in a building, fire, life safety, HVAC, power, water, right, wastewater, but they are not invited to a tabletop exercise for a cyber response. So getting all those folks to be part of that. And then actually pay to do a full red team outside the network in evaluation. I think that's another thing that people have been shying away from. I'm concerned I might do some damage. Well, you still can constrain it so that you won't do damage, but you'll be able to understand access. And once you understand access, then you can employ solutions or have people trained or those sort of things. I think that would be helpful. And then I always ask the CISOs or any of the management to emphasize 3 words whenever there's any kind of a training event. And then what about OT? I mean, if you could just ask that in any type of effort that's going on, I think that'd be really helpful to get just everyone thinking about that and understanding that.
And going back to the tabletop exercises, who are some of those stakeholders that you think should be involved from the OT side? Are we going right down like the hard hats, so to speak?
Right. No, absolutely. So there are people who are running those. You have public works people or facility managers, energy managers, civil engineers. They are making sure all these things run 24/7, and they do a great job, and the systems are made to last and run 24/7, 365. And we really haven't had a lot of downtime, despite, even if crazy weather or other things, they're able to bring them back. So it's great that they need to be there. Plus the mission people or whoever's in charge of business operations to understand the dependencies of the critical assets or crown jewels to that. And then the network and cyber people. So you really need to have like 3 groups of people part of the exercises. And a lot of times we'll see only 1 or 2 of those be part of those cyber tabletop exercises.
Earlier you mentioned CISOs that are taking on the OT responsibility under their kind of domain. There's a different charter there on the OT side. It's all about safety as opposed to protecting servers, the integrity of data, et cetera. How big of a cultural challenge is that in your experience?
Yeah, so that's perfect, right? So understanding that difference and a focus on safety and operations, and that we can't manufacture something if this system goes down. I've seen some exercises to where they'll pull fire alarms, and if everybody leaves, which is your initial impact, and you don't have any kind of internal recovery, then you're not very resilient there. So that is one of the key things that will help, is to have that new mindset that safety and operations are what's at stake.
And is this an area where government, DoD, whatever agency that makes sense, can lead by example kind of thing?
Well, what I've seen is that the commercial side has been leading by example, by integrating those functions, by pulling those functions under CISOs and asking, where do we stand on that? What really needs to happen is some kind of a scorecard and accountability for OT, which aligns with what's going on for IT. And that scorecard needs to understand a safety and risk index that could be different than the IT scorecard.
Right. And again, that's a cultural issue
it absolutely
on some
is.
fronts.
And I've seen some commercial entities embrace this, which is great. And I think the government should learn from that and integrate a lot of those best practices as we develop our own processes and policies, technologies, and have our folks implement those.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because you talk to IT folks and they're like, "Oh, I'd love to see it come from the top down, so to speak, from government's perspective." So it's
right. Well, what I've seen is, let's say, for example, Clarity has business with a diverse set of customers, and they are learning all of what works for that diverse set. And we also have a diverse set of customers, and so understanding, what are some best practices and lessons learned there, and they can help us as we're still evolving and maturing our OT cyber defense role.
I mean, there's so much OT on the federal side as well.
Yes, and it's been kind of fascinating to do the discovery. Let's say one of the buildings that is near the Pentagon, 2 million square feet, 6,000 people could work there. And when you go down into the basement, right, you've got the security forces operations center, and they're managing 10,000 devices. So the security cameras, the badge readers, and anything to do with first response. So you leave there, and then you go to the network operations center, and they're managing 25,000 devices. Again, for 6,000 people, all the cell phones, the access. The security forces do the access controls, but the IT people will do all your computers, the infrastructure closets, connectivity to servers, and that sort of thing. So that's all managed by them. Then you leave that operations center. Now you go into the building operations center, and they are managing 50,000 devices. So twice as many as the network IT people, and 4 times as many as the security forces. That, I think, has been revealing of the scale of OT in these facilities. And if people say, well, what about the IoT? Well, there might be some, but we don't need a lot of smart toasters in our government buildings, right? But we do have smart meters, and that's kind of, people are saying that's one or the other. But I think just to understand, we have a lot more sensors. We have thermostats in every room. And, one of the examples I always remember is the Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C. had a new conference room they built, brought in everyone. They had like a United Nations group, and where jobs were going to be and where focus was going to be. And the week after, the facility engineer is walking through and notices the thermostat doesn't work. And they start looking at it and say, well, I don't understand what's wrong. Well, they had a network person look at it, and they noticed that the connection went through an unprotected switch that went directly to the internet, because it went to the company that was managing it. And the thermostat was converted to a microphone. And the IP address where that was going was China. So that is fascinating. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But whose job is to protect against that, right? So the CISO needs to understand, do I have my IT people checking that out? Or do I have my OT people checking out? And where that balance is and bringing that together.